I think this sermon is, God put something on my heart that was really hard, that was a difficult journey that I went through in my life, and it meant a lot of personal sharing, a lot of vulnerability, and just coming before God. It was all about just let God speak through the Word. You know, there's, I want to draw a lot on today, either the dark side of passion or the what it means to live without passion. But you know, we use the word passion so easily, and there are so many words that have lost a lot of meaning. Whether it's, you know, it's words like awesome or words like, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And I think passion is going through that same process where now passion is just, it's a flavour of tea that you get at Starbucks. And you know, passion just means, it means spending time, you know, by the beach or anything that's enjoyable or entertaining. And, you know, I think about the way they describe the cross as being the passion of Christ. And we would just never use the word in that way. And there is this dark side to passion that's about things like grief, like passionate grief, that passionate rage, passionate sadness, and passionate joy, and all these different things. And the way that we've numbed it down is to, in a way, deny that half of it, and then soften the good part. So instead of joy, it's just happiness or something like that. But I have really come to the conclusion that we live in a world that is all set up to just numb us down a little bit. I have a lot of friends who've been sick this last year, and they've been on medication, and they've gone through all sorts of things, and as they've come off medication, they've said, I really feel good to be alive now that I'm coming back off the medication. I've been on it so long. And I don't think that's just medication in our world. I think that we numb ourselves down to all sorts of realities and situations. There are things in our world that we don't want to think about. There are things in our local areas and neighbourhoods that we don't want to think about. There are situations we don't want to face up to in our personal lives. And we have this way of just making everything a little bit acceptable. And we don't want to be, we have this idea of tolerating people, right? Tolerance is a big word in our society, but there's a sub-clause to that law that says no one's allowed to harass me. So I'll tolerate you, but I don't want to be harassed by you, which means I want a friendlier version of you. I'll tolerate you as long as you don't show me what's real. So I don't want to see that part of reality. And the other thing I want to talk about today is what the church is meant to be in a world that is numb. Or what is the church supposed to be in a church that's like that? Or more to the point, church is a word we throw around a lot. What would it look like to have a prophetic witness in a world that is numb? Like, what can we say to a world that is like that? What has God placed in our hearts? And I want to look at passages from Isaiah, from Jeremiah, books we don't often turn to because they're a little bit confronting. And the way that those people were able to stand in a world that was not feeling what was happening all around it, and they were able to shake it and wake it up to the feelings that was happening, and that passion, that the grief and the pain. I mean, I remember this line from an episode of The Simpsons where Reverend Lovejoy, or whatever his name is, gets up and he says, "We're going to be reading from the book of the Lamentations of Jeremiah." And it's just like, that is the worst possible book you could read out of. There's this book in the Bible that is called Lamentations that's about expressing your grief. And when do we express grief in our culture? You know, it's something that we do so privately. So a prophet like Jeremiah is able to speak to that. And I mean, that's what I want to talk about today. But before I get into it, I just want to pray a little bit. God, I come before you today, and once again, I'm thankful to you for this conference. And I'm thankful for this message that you've put on my heart, and I just pray that this could be a moment where there is some awakening, there's some healing, that you would work through this. I bring before you everyone who's come here today, who's bleary-eyed, who's not used to worshipping at 10 a.m., who's in a socially new situation and feels awkward, or anyone who's come here today and doesn't know if they can really open up to you because there's pain they don't want to face up to, or any of these issues. God, I just pray that you would put your hand on each of our hearts and you would minister to us in this service this morning. Amen. When I was 20 years old, many of you know the story, I was a youth leader in a church. I came out in about the most ungraceful or disgraceful way that you can possibly conceive of anybody coming out of the closet. I meet people these days who are thinking through how they could come out of the closet and how to do it in a wise way. And I think to myself, I never thought you could plan it out. I just thought that you just... Yeah, so, you know, if I could go back, I might do that a bit differently, but I went through a really awkward time. My whole life changed very quickly. I knew very little other than fundamentalist Christianity in a certain way, and I found myself thrown out into this world, and I moved into a very dependent relationship that lasted for a couple of years, and then when it ended, I finally faced up to my feelings. And I reacted to that in a couple of different ways. I started sleeping up to 15, 16 hours a night. I started rapidly losing weight in an unhealthy way, and I stopped being able to look at anybody's face. I would find myself looking everywhere but their face. And what that process was about for me was numbing up, because there was stuff that I needed to face up to, and it took me a long time to face up to it, and I've faced up to it over many years. And I think that we have an instinctive reaction in situations like that, where it would be too hard to face it all at once. So we numb up, and slowly we start to come to terms with it. And I think that's a really important process. And I'm preaching about numbness today, but I don't want anybody to think that I'm saying if you feel that, you need to snap out of it. Because snapping out of it sometimes is the worst thing you can do. That numbness is a protection mechanism that's there for your good. But I also want to talk about how the church can live in a world that is numb, a world that helps people to stay in that situation for too long, actually encourages people to be numb when they don't need to be numb, and how we as a church can be a witness to that world by being a passionate people, because the heart of God is passionate. And when we know the heart of God, we know passion, and we're able to testify to something different, to a greater reality. Our world does that in a lot of ways. I don't think that numbness is just a personal, individual response that we make to difficult situations. I think that everywhere we look in our world, we're encouraged to medicate ourselves in a lot of different ways. Whether that's just about the smell of coffee as you drive past the McDonald's drive-thru every morning. You know, we medicate. It's not always just the things that are called medication that we use to medicate. We use coffee. Some people use addictions that are famous, that are alcohol, that are gambling, that are smoking, that we talk about those things. But there are other ways that we do that in our world as well. I think about the way that, one thing that I do is I practice yoga a lot. And I notice that when you go to the gym and you do yoga, I almost feel like you're getting a shot of medication. Like I was trained under a yoga practitioner who had a very holistic approach to it. And then later on in life I joined a gym, and it's just like you get this 1 hour of silence, and you're thrown right in there, and all of a sudden everything goes right down. And then you just get thrown right back out into the world. And I'm like, this is a really strange way to practice a spiritual discipline. But I think people are just desperate to get this 1 hour of a soothing, calm, reflective moment, sometimes so that you can cope with the rest of your day. You know, it's funny that we talk about the ways that we medicate, but I think we use church in the same way. I think that a lot of the time what we expect from our church is comforting rituals. You know, rituals that were meant to stimulate people to spiritual growth, rituals that were meant to call us to be deeper people, rituals that were meant to take us as community. And what we want to do is step into church just to get my church pill for the week, so that I'm somehow able to now survive it through the rest of the week. You know, medication in places that we wouldn't normally think what we're doing is medicating ourselves. I look at the way that the junk food industry advertises. And they may as well be selling medication. You know, Kit Kat, take a break, 15 minutes. McCafe, you go into a cafe or a restaurant, you get the soothing music, you get the pastel colours, you get the comfort food, and all of it, it's just another way of soothing. And it makes me ask, what is it if our whole society is gearing up to just calm people down and soothe them so much? What is it that we as a society can't face up to? Why do we need so many breaks, and why do we need so many feel-good movies? And why is everything, when you turn on TV, why is every single channel just playing stuff that is about cheering you up again? Why is the only thing that we ever need cheering up? I mean, I love watching Glee, but let's face it, it's a little bit of a pick-me-up at the end of the day, right? Because you have teenagers singing and it's bright and happy and they're all smiling. It's the only one emotion that they face, and okay, maybe Maybe that's a bit unfair. Maybe Lee has gone a little bit deeper from that. But that's how the entertainment industry works. I think that there are ways sometimes that we get soothed and medicated that we haven't even consented to.
Yeah.
I have this constant battle with shopping centres. And Steve knows not to take me to one because I just get so frustrated. The way that, I think you call them malls in the United States. Yeah, that's right. I've never understood if it was the same thing. Because you see so much on TV about the kids are going to hang out at the mall. And I'm like, people hang out at these places? That can't be a shopping centre. What are they doing there hanging out with Kmart and... Anyway. We've squared up a lot of different issues about language between, but you go into these shopping centres, right, and it would be really easy just to take an escalator at one level and the next and the next. They move them away from each other so that you have to go in this great big rotation so that you just get to see everything. It's like you need to be bathed in neon lights and you do a circuit every level. You're not really asked permission to do that, but they're medicating you in a certain way, maybe helping you to spend more. They're playing the soothing music. There is a whole scientific industry about testing what music they play out and how that relates to the spending levels that people have. And we get lights. When I went to IKEA recently, I was walking past a muffin tray, and I can really smell cookie batter. And I say to Steve, what's going on? Because Steve tells me how everything works in the world. I said, why is there this, have someone been cooking cookies in this cookie tray? He's like, oh no, there's a machine over there, it's pumping smells out. So we're getting smells pumped into us as we walk around with the lights and the soothing music. Every time we watch one of our soothing TV shows, we get soothing commercial breaks that tell us all this different stuff, and we're kind of in this, we live in this blur, right? We're taking our medications when we need them, when we don't need them, other people are pumping them into us. And then sometimes I think we just end up in this state where we're on autopilot. I've had terrifying conversations with drivers who say to me, I don't remember the last 20 minutes of driving. And I'm like, do you know? Some of you are nodding out there. We're just on autopilot where we've flicked this switch and we've just glazed over. And no wonder we're doing that with everything that's going on in our lives to soothe us. Or if it's just routine. I mean, I don't drive. But I like to have certain routines and certain key things throughout my day so that I don't have to think about it too much, so that I don't have to be aware of things. And when I've been doing something for long enough, I have no idea that I've done it. I mean, Steve's constantly asking me, have you locked the door? I'm like, I have no idea. No recollection of locking the door, but that doesn't mean it's not locked. So we're not even aware of what's happening in the world around us. We're completely numb. And why do we need, as a culture, to numb ourselves out in this way? And while it's okay to feel some numbness, if you have that for the sake of emotional protection, when there's so much of it and we're surrounded by it in so many ways, don't you ever long to experience reality? I remember, I thought this was really a really profound statement that came out of the movie The Matrix. And there's this guy in it who's outside of the Matrix. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, I'm assuming most of you would have seen it, but there's this whole fake reality that everyone is living in. And the real world is completely different. Everyone's in this computer, everyone thinks everything is fine, and they're actually just, everyone's kind of in these chambers of, they've never been awake, they're just sent into this alternative reality. And there are some people who've escaped and are living in the real world. And at the end of it, there's a guy called Cypher who betrays everyone to the enemy and has all his friends potentially killed in this battle, in this betrayal where he just gives it all up for the ability to go back into the Matrix and remember nothing. And there's something really creepy about that. And it makes you ask yourself, well, what is wrong with that? If we could live in this fake world and everybody's happy there, what is wrong with it? But there's a part of us that says, no, I want to know reality. I want to break out of that. So the question is then, if we're living in this state of just being stupefied by everything that's happening in the world, and we want to break back into reality, how are we going to get out of that? How are we going to pierce the numbers?